coming through when the growth look good on you. Best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep fitting in love.
Yes, people. You know what time it is. You know what it is. We are back in the building. Another Scout Watch. You guys can obviously see on the screen. Today, we are here to talk about Jurrien Timber of Ajax. Guys, just before we head into everything, please make sure you smash a like. Please make sure you share and subscribe to the damn channel if you wouldn't mind, please. But yes, we're here to do another Scout Watch. As I said, you guys can see on the screen, Timber, new defensive cover. There has been quite a bit of talk about the defender in regards to potentially joining Liverpool this season, but not also just Liverpool. I think Manchester United hold an interest in the defender as well. Played under Ten Hag, so you know it might be something that Ten Hag is potentially looking at for the summer in terms of getting a deal done. That could be an easier deal for him to be able to do. We do have at Liverpool, you know, the Dutch connection, so to speak, obviously with Van Dijk, with Gakpo there. So maybe that might be a way to potentially sway. Who kind of knows, you know, who kind of knows? And when we're looking at someone like a Timber, I think, well, I mean, is he a centre back? Is he a right back? Can he, you know, he can jump into, you know, defensive midfield. You know, he seems like a versatile individual. So it's quite interesting to see that we are potentially looking at a player like this. And it's interesting to also see, you know, where would he kind of play? Do you know what I mean? And I think that for me is obviously the key in terms of whether or not if this is going to be a good deal or not. But you know, we digress, and obviously we'll dive into, you know, what Timber's kind of all about, you know, the type of player that he is, you know, the kind of things that I think he does well, the things he might need to work on, especially. But you know, one of the main things I think about is, you know, he spent most of his time this season anyway, and to be honest, his majority at Ajax, majority of his career at Ajax, where obviously he's played, you know, he's played mostly in that centre back position. Now, if I take off the banner here, you'll see that he has played right back. But when I say he's played right back, some people might think obviously he's probably played there maybe potentially more. But I'm just talking about where he initially might start a game, you know, kind of thing, or come on in a game and stuff like that. This is obviously his stats for Ajax, you know, since he made his debut for them a few years back. So when I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, okay, so this is mostly a centre back who can play right back, as opposed to a right back who can play centre back. And that for me is a massive, massive difference, because then I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, that might, in some people's eyes, because he can play in one position, it's a bit like Lisandro Martinez can play defensive midfield, but I guess his most comfortable position for Manchester United anyway is obviously playing at centre back. So, you know, and they haven't really tried him, I don't think, in that defensive midfield position, even though he might potentially be able to play there. So, you know, for me, it's, I'm looking at it and I'm just like, okay, if you're getting in a centre back by trade, are you saying one of two things? Like, and we already know how Klopp stays, man. Klopp's one of them kind of guys. Like, he likes to get players, obviously, who are versatile and who can fill in a multitude of positions. We're obviously losing a player like James Milner, a player who can obviously play in a lot of positions. You're losing someone like Firmino, someone who's quite versatile in what he can do, not necessarily in the positions, just versatile in what he can do. Is Klopp now looking at it in the players that he's trying to sign in the summer? And is he saying, okay, if I'm trying to sign players, they need to be able to play more than one position? And if so, then Timber might be an option. And guys, please, whilst you're listening to this, whilst you're watching this, let me know in the comments what you guys kind of think, you know, in regards to, you know, a Jurrien Timber potentially joining Liverpool, or do you think he's better served at other clubs? Like I said, Manchester United, I believe, do hold an interest in the defender. If we're looking at his heat map here, you can see everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, you know, and obviously mostly down that right kind of centre back role, not necessarily wide right, but just in that centre back role. He has played in a back three before, for both Holland and Ajax. So, I can see that he's someone who is quite comfortable. Forget about the actual rating in itself. I think Ajax lost this game anyway. But when you're looking at a player who can play in these kind of positions, again, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, all right, so they played a back three, obviously, in this game, and this is just this game alone. One thing I noticed quite a lot about Timber and Alvarez, who unfortunately in this picture here got himself sent off. If you look at the heat map of Timber, you can see down that obviously right kind of centre back role is obviously his main position, but it's quite further up the pitch as well. He's slotting into that centre back, defence midfield, and central midfield kind of areas. So that tells me that he's a player who likes to move into those positions quite a lot. Do you know what I mean? So I'm looking at that and thinking, okay, that's the kind of versatility. And when I'm looking at when we played Ajax Liverpool in the Champions League, one thing that I saw quite a lot was Timber and Alvarez were swapping positions quite a lot. And I did like that, to be fair. Even though I know they didn't win the game or anything, that was something that I noticed quite a lot, is that they were changing positions amongst themselves depending on the situation at hand. So whether they had the ball or whether one of them had the ball. So if Timber had the ball and he was coming out of the defense, then Alvarez would then slot back in. Now, obviously, that's just tactically the way that Ajax obviously set themselves up. But I like the fact that they were able to kind of do that. Hence the reason why I did actually take a look at Edson Alvarez before and thought, maybe is this someone who we might potentially be looking at? This is obviously earlier in the season when, I mean, even now, when Fabinho was kind of going, off the boil. Obviously here, he's playing in a right centre-back role. This is obviously for Holland. Obviously, Holland have got Virgil van Dijk and Nathan Ake. Those two positions, I think, are kind of already sewn up in terms of Ake's always going to play left centre-back. Van Dijk's obviously always going to play down the middle. So for this game, he was then playing as the right centre-back. Again, I feel like he is a little bit comfortable playing in that position anyway. So I'm like, okay, fair enough. So it's just to kind of show you he is a player that does like to play in a multitude of positions. Obviously, this is for Holland again, playing at right back this time. Dumfries, I think, was dropped or wasn't available for this game or on the bench potentially. So again, he can play in various kind of positions. Right centre back. So he is he the right centre back that if we're going to go to a back four, is that the type of player that we're potentially looking at? I'm just showing you all of these kind of different positions because it just tells me that Klopp again is looking at players who are very, very versatile, players who can play in a multitude of positions. This is obviously his stats from this season in terms of minutes played and games played. 46 games altogether, both Europa League, Champions League, Eredivisie, and the cup competitions. 2 goals, 2 assists. Nothing really to write home about in terms of the goals and assists. Again, he plays centre back, so I'm not really expecting him to kind of get any better in terms of those kind of numbers. But it's the sheer fact that he can play a volume of games, and he's still quite young. He is still quite young. And, I took a look at, how he would fare, potentially against other players in our team. So I looked at a Gomez, Konate, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. So I want to kind of take a little look at how he kind of compares to those players who are already in our team. And would he be a good addition to kind of have, as a squad option, or potentially take one of these guys, place in the squad. So this is obviously him against, this is obviously per 90. Crazy one thing I found out in the Premier League, I think Gomez has played more games than Konate. I think Gomez has played 20 games in the Premier League and Konate has played 18, which is crazy to think. But obviously that's just due to the injuries and stuff like that. But obviously just a couple of stats here. Depends on how you want to look at passing accuracy, obviously better than a Joe Gomez. Passes attempted, kind of relatively even. Chances created, 0.4 to 0.1. Fair enough. We're looking at the ground duels contested. Timber's coming out on top. Ground duels 1, obviously, is going to come out on top in that regards. But Gomez has a better ground duel success. And he's better, just a little bit better when it does come to interceptions and blocks. So again, we're all looking at Joe Gomez potentially. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? We don't really know what's happening, in regards to that. I think that's more down to if Liverpool get a sizable bid, they might potentially entertain it. But, when you're looking at the stats and things like that, and this is coming from a guy who's obviously played less games than Timber. He's played 30 odd games in the Eredivisie this season. You're like, okay, fair enough. Crossing accuracy, I was surprised to see that, Joe Gomez is on 0. Timber's obviously got 25% of a cross accuracy. Passes in opposition half, I thought that was quite interesting as well. Timber's obviously got 38.5 to Gomez's 25.8. So I looked at these kind of like little things, and I thought, okay, to be honest, when you're looking at all of these kind of stats, nothing really to write home about, and it's not always going to be like that anyway. It's just more to show you how they kind of match up to each other, in terms of, are we potentially going over the top when we think about certain players and stuff like that, in terms of wanting them to potentially leave and stuff like that, when you're comparing them to other players, they're almost quite similar. So it's just about, maybe if certain players found a little bit of form, would they be as good as, potentially saving a bit of money and not, getting in other players. I'm not saying that, by the way, either way. I think Timber's a decent player, and I think he could be a good option, but you're going to have to start letting somebody go. Do you know what I mean? Yes, or someone, he's got to have to play in a position which isn't going to be too clustered. Otherwise, you've got 4 centre-backs, let's say, next season. If none of the centre-backs leave, bar Nat Phillips, then, Timber going to be number 5. I don't see that happening. I mean, you could say he could be like how Gomez can play centre-back and can play right-back. So maybe Timber comes in as that. But then, is that what we're looking to potentially, do? Or obviously formation then comes into play as well. This is obviously his stats against Konate this season. Passes obviously in opponents are 38.5 to Konate's 21.2. In own half, they're relatively even. Even the forward passes, they're relatively even. Short passes completed. Duels contested, though, this is where Konate obviously comes out on top, which I actually expected, especially with tackles made and stuff like that. I did genuinely think, Konate, when you do watch him, I feel like he would be a better defender. But again, I'm looking at this because I'm looking at the right centre back position. I'm looking at that position because I feel like that's an area of the team, that's an area of the pitch that I feel that Liverpool do need to strengthen in, and it's an area of the pitch that, if we want to be able to have the right kind of depth in the team, then we're going to need to look at these kind of areas instead of trying to shy away from them and praying that, players just come back into form and stuff like that. We can obviously hope for that. I'm not saying that you cannot, but at the same time, I love to have a bit of a contingency plan, and I like to be able to at least then say, okay, if this isn't working out, for example, then, we're still in a position whereby we are still relatively strong. So obviously moving on to some more stats here, looking at passes attempted, Timber does try to, feed off these passes. Passes completed, goals, in terms of the attacking side, I probably would expect that he would be better than a Konate anyway, to be honest with you. But again, this is where I then look and I'm like, I was a little bit shocked. Take on success from Konate, 83.33 to Timber's 55.88. Ground duels contested. Again, like I said, I expect Konate to be there. Ground duels 1. The success obviously being a lot better, and with the interceptions and blocks. So again, looking at that, just again, this is just stats alone, by the way. And I said, but it's again the versatility of the player that we're talking about. When you're looking at a Timber player being able to play centre back, obviously on the right centre back, can play in the back 3 in the middle, can play right back as well, can obviously help out in the defensive midfield positions. I'm like, all right, well, if he can do all of these kind of things, that actually might be a very good option for someone like Klopp, who likes to have players who can do that. But also, he can then challenge someone else in the squad. So another player that we obviously looked at, I'm not saying that he's going to take his position, but one player that a lot of people keep saying, oh, maybe if we're buying a Timber, it's because we're trying to sign a right back because we need cover there, could be a Trent Alexander-Arnold. So again, looking at Trent's stats, obviously in comparison, tackles made, Trent comes out on top, take-ons completed, take-on success, ground duels contested, Trent's coming out on top in all of those, absolutely all of those. Passes in opponent's half, though, this actually shocked me, to be fair. I would have thought that Trent would be a lot higher, but Trent's only at 33.2 to Timber's 38.5. Passes completed in own half, short passes completed. Timber's coming out quite high on those kind of numbers. And then I looked at the duels contested. Obviously, Trent's not doing as much, but that just might just be a thing tactically, potentially. But this is where Trent really does excel. Crossing accuracy, long passes attempted, successful crosses from open play. This is where Trent really does excel. And then when we do look at this, though, so I see here possession, like ball recoveries, Trent really, really good this season in regards to ball recoveries. And then you see, obviously, possession loss, you can see Trent is a whopping 24.5 in comparison to Jurrien Timber. And I will back Trent here because this is where I look at Trent and I say, it's because of the type of passes that he's trying to do in games. It's because of the way that he plays in matches. Let me zip this up. It's the way that he obviously plays that it's going to be like that regardless of anything, because he's one of those daring type of players. He's going to try the long pass, and if it comes off, it comes off. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Whereas Timber, I don't think, has got those kind of qualities in his locker to be able to do that. Hence the reason why his numbers are obviously going to be a lot lower than a Trent Alexander-Arnold. That isn't to say that, Timber can't pass the ball. It's just more Trent is the more daring, the more creative player. Whereas Timber, I think, could be like a Trent, i.e. someone who can play right back and then slot into the defensive midfield positions every now and again, or help out in the defensive midfield position. But he's a more defensive player. But again, when I'm looking at it, I'm also like, again, this is just ground rules, contested success and stuff like that. Timber's probably coming out a little bit better than Trent in that regards. But when I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking to myself, I don't see him as a right back. That's not really the position that I feel that he's going to come into the squad as. I feel like he's coming in as a centre back, but I think he's coming in as, if Klopp persists with this tactic. This is just obviously very, very big ifs. If Klopp persists with this tactic, I think he comes in as the right centre back. And for me, I mentioned this on Jamie Phillips' show the other day, and I said, for me, what I would want to see is Liverpool get a better right-sided centre-back than a Konate, someone who's a lot more comfortable on the ball, someone who's able to just defend out wide and isn't going to be, like is it a rabbit or deer in the headlights kind of thing, because when I'm looking at Konate and the way that he likes to play his game is not comfortable out there on that right-hand side. As soon as you ask him to go and do that, it just becomes a little bit techie. We saw against Aston Villa the way that Ollie Watkins, obviously the way that he was able to stretch the team. The only reason why he was getting a bit of joy down that side is because he's able to stretch Konate over to that side. He's getting Konate into that uncomfortable zone. Once you get Konate into that zone, it's a little bit problematic. When Konate's in the middle, though, it's for me, it's fine because he's a very, very good defender. But once you start telling him, I need you to defend out wide, and whether you do or don't win the ball, I just need you to get the ball, but it can't just be get the ball and hoof it, because we're trying to be a team who are trying to then build up from the back, build up play. If you then get the ball and then it's just a hoof, then we've just wasted possession anyway. Yes, you might have negated the danger, but we've just wasted possession. We need someone with a bit more composure. Again, whether I think Timber could be that kind of guy, I think he could potentially do that. Whether he's the best fit, I don't think so. I think there's better players out there than him, but I don't really know. And in Manchester United's team, I don't actually know where they see him playing. Maybe they see him playing centre back. Maybe they see him playing right back. I don't really know what Ten Hag is obviously thinking. This is obviously Timber playing for Ajax. Obviously, this is where he's picking up the ball in that kind of attacking midfield position, to be honest with you. And he's just obviously about to feed the ball into the striker, Haller. This is obviously from, I think, last season or the season before. And when Haller was obviously still there banging all them goals for Ajax. So again, I'm just trying to show everybody just that versatility. This is the kind of positions that he likes to take up. This is him, by the way, in this game, I think specifically, he was actually playing in the right centre-back role in a back three. So, if he's playing in that role in a back three, and that's the positions that he's taking up, obviously, defensively, it then depends on who else is obviously back there. I can't see if there's another man behind the guy on the ball. But those are the kind of positions he would love to obviously take up on the pitch. And this is obviously, again, you can see in the middle of the pitch, he's there. And this is where I mentioned about him potentially swapping with an Edson Alvarez at times in the game. But that works to their favour. That works to their advantage. Is that going to be the same thing that's going to happen at Liverpool? The way that Liverpool defend when we've got this new formation of three at the back, it's not even three at the back. it's Van Dijk and Konate as a two, and Robbo's never there, and we don't ever have anyone on that right-hand side. Hence the reason why you can stretch Liverpool down the flanks, and you just leave them to do the 1v1 defending, and then it becomes a little bit problematic, because then that's when I feel we become very, very vulnerable. If we were able to say have a player like Fabinho, for example, if he's in the team, just to be able to say we're in these kind of defensive situations, you just drop back in, then perfect. I feel like then it wouldn't be so bad, because then you can have a Konate out there or a Timber out there who can play in those positions and are not always going to become isolated. Timber isn't as athletic as a Konate, so hasn't really got as much pace, isn't as strong. So leaving him in these 1v1 situations, I think that could prove problematic as well. But that's just his weakness side of things. When I'm looking at him as just a player, I think he's a cool, calm, composed individual who can play in multiple positions. I think, would he be a good option for Liverpool? Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I'll take a look at maybe some other right-sided centre backs, or wide centre backs, if you want to call them that, to kind of see the fact that he can play obviously right back. Fair enough. He can obviously help out in defensive midfield. He's got the kind of tactical awareness to be able to understand when he needs to drop in, potentially when he needs to swap with his defensive midfielder. But will our defensive midfielder have the same kind of thinking as, you know, a Timber, to be able to say, all right, well, if you go, I come, you know, we're going to swap over this, that, and the third. Maybe that's what, you know, he's Klopp is thinking with him and Trent. Maybe they do a swap every now and again. I have no idea. Like, I really don't have a clue. That's why looking at Timber, I'm like, he seems like a good player, but again, I'm just unsure as to what type of role this kind of player is going to do in the team, because I'm looking at him more as a squad option than anything else. That's not a bad thing, by the way. You need to have your squad fillers, and not every player you're going to sign is going to be a starter anyway. I'm just looking at him thinking, okay, where would he potentially fit? Heck, we might go back to a back four next season. If so, he can obviously play right back. He can play right-sided centre back. Depends on who leaves, who stays. But again, it's just about being able to have that kind of option. But guys, let me know in the comments, what do you guys think, you know, in regards to Timber? Is he a player that you guys want us to sign? Is he a player that would be a good addition for us, alongside obviously other players that we should be signing in the summer anyway? But would he be a good addition for Liverpool, or do you think that, you know, he's not really going to be the signing that we need, and maybe we should potentially look elsewhere? For me, I'm going to say good option. I'll say he's a good option. I don't know what the fee reported for him is, but I would say he'd be a decent option to have, someone who I think can come in and rotate. And I think where we're going to be playing potentially, well, we're going to be playing, you know, Europa League football next season. We're going to need to have some type of quality, you know, on the bench. And I feel like he is good enough quality to be playing, especially in that Europa League competition, where I'm not thinking, oh, bloody hell, we're playing such and such, for example, at the back, who's been absolutely calamitous for the last 3 or 4 games, etc., etc. So let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? That's today's, obviously, Scout Watch, done and dusted. Jurrien Timber of Ajax. Let me know what you think. I'm G, and I am out.